Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. We're going to switch gears a little bit here and show you a little bit about the Axis and Allies Naval Miniatures, the War at Sea collection. And there's a few different versions of it, but it is out of print now. So I'm just going to preface this whole thing by saying if you have any of these sitting in your closet and you don't play, I'm kind of in the market to pick up some more. I've got about 250, 260 of them. But there's a few ships here and there that I'd like to use to fill out what I've got. So we're just going to lay that out there. So just send me a message or something if you got something that you don't use anymore, don't play with, let me know. Well, early on in the initial iteration of this game, you played on a map that is all squares. You can clean this up. It's all squares. You put these two pieces of paper together. You know, it's a nice looking map and everything, and it's all orthogonal movement. All right, so it's not a hex based. It's all square based. And the center of each square is 4 inches thereabouts away from an adjacent square. The problem that we ran into was it's a little rigid. You know, anytime you play a hex-based game or any like this, a square-based game or anything, and you can move from square to square, it's a little rigid for us now that we've played games like X-Wing and War Machine, Warhammer, all those sorts of things, where you get out the good old tape measure and you take a look at things, how far you are, and you do your distance that way. So we've decided to kind of do away with the square map there and just move on to a cloth-based open system here. So I got this this cloth recently, and it's not cheap. Amazing how much cloth costs. Could probably go buy 20 t-shirts that look like this for cheaper than the cloth was. But there you have it. I got it now, and I think it looks kind of cool. It looks like waves, and maybe even some cloud cover if you're way above, what have you. I think it looks pretty cool. We'll get to the ships and everything in just a minute here. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the terrain options that you may have. Now, there are some people out there who make some beautiful terrain, and I mean, they have got it down pat. They know what they want, and they go out there and they buy all the neat things and get her done. Well, you might be thinking to yourself, I'd like to make some terrain, and for some of my different games I have, maybe you do play War Machine or Warhammer or something, and some of that terrain can get pretty pricey, and all you really need is a wall to hide behind, or you need a hill to obscure, you know, your line of sight. Well, the dollar store is a great friend. At the dollar store, you can go pick up things like this. Okay, it's this dry fake grass. Okay, it's pretty good stuff. Then you get the stuff that's a little richer, nice rich green. And yeah, you probably have rocks outside, but I wanted mine to kind of look like lava rock and look a little bit more uniform. So I just went and picked up some of that stuff, and then these things here, dollar store, big heavy container of that. Same as that. That one's just a little bit more brown than gold. The other one's kind of gold, so looks pretty nice. And then I got some foam, and you can get this foam anywhere. Dollar store is where I get mine. If you go to the specialty shops, they'll charge you like $5 for this little piece of foam, and you can get them 2 for $1 at the dollar store. And they come in all shapes and sizes. I even found a ring. I haven't used it yet, but I'm sure I'll come up with a use for it one of these days. I was thinking of cutting it into sections, and it could be nice little reefs. Who knows? But then I also went and got, there's a piece of foam here, and it was a taller one, and I cut it into 2 pieces. Just threw some glue on it, threw some of the rocks down, threw down some of the grasses and whatnot. And I got to trim this up and clean it up a little bit. And all that glue is going to actually dry clear. Okay. I'm also building a little bit of a reef. This is kind of a trial run. Going to see how it goes. I just used a couple of big popsicle sticks and taped them together on the bottom and then glued them together on top, and then I threw down some epoxy because you don't want the rocks falling off from these things. So I just used the little 2-part epoxy there, so it's a good thing to have. The carpenter's glue that I use is good stuff, but sometimes it just gives way. We'll see how well it can hold on to the little bits, the grit here. Hopefully it holds on. But again, I use the epoxy for the reef, so I'm hoping that that holds together. Now, if you're just not the type of person who wants to do anything at all like that, even to this fairly amateurish level, it is fun though. It is fun to create your own terrain, I gotta say. And I mean, hey, I did these in like half an hour. I did not take any time at all with this. I just wanted to get playing. So you can use anything you have lying around. For instance, the diminutive hockey puck with the greatest team in the world on it. But there you go, it's just a hockey puck. But another thing you can use, if you have any laying around, you can get these stones at any, like a Home Depot or anything like that, or at a landscaping place, and they're rock, like it's a rock, right? Like it's poured, of course, but it's very heavy. You can hear it. But it actually looks like an island. So, and you could probably, if you have the right disc, you could probably use your cutter and shape that any way you want. So, just some options there for some terrain. You know, anything to block line of sight, which is a good idea in this game. On the original map, I'll just scooch back on over. On the original map, you can see that there's some islands, and the islands block movement and they block line of sight. Okay, so for the terrain, the idea is going to be that it blocks line of sight, and the ships can't get within, 2 inches of it, unless it's a patrol boat can get within 1 inch, because they have a shallow draft, of course. So, but these are all little things that you can fidget with. And there's so many other types of things. You guys, I'm sure there's people watching this just shaking your heads going, what a waste of time. But, just to liven up the game board, the play area a little bit, you guys can go ahead and do this. Of course, you can go ahead and buy pre-made stuff at your local hobby shop and your friendly local game store if they sell such things and it's already made for you. Or you could find somebody that likes to do it and pay that person some coin and give him or her the supplies and say, hey, how would you like to throw this together for me? And I'm sure you get something very, very beautiful and not quite so utilitarian as all this. But what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pause this. I'm going to clear things up a little bit, and I'm going to run through the game with you, some of the rules and whatnot, and then we'll do a round. Okay? Back in a second. Alright, so here we have our two sides ready to face off. We got the Japanese fleet on this side with about 5 aircraft and a sub. Couple of capital ships there, the carriers, and then of course the Yamato. It's a big ugly brute, that one. And then on this side we have a multinational force consisting of some British equipment. So we got 3 planes and we've got 1 carrier, the Illustrious. And we got an American PT boat, a light carrier, some Avenger torpedo bombers, the Yorktown, and the Arizona, of course. And being Canadian, I thought I'd throw in a couple of Canadian ships. We got a destroyer and a cruiser. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through a couple of the key points of this game, and then we'll get down to some gameplay. But it's pretty important that you understand how these things move, how they shoot, and how long they can last, because some of them cost a lot. You see the Yamato is worth 70, and that's the most expensive ship I have. I know that there are a couple others that are a bit higher, but you can see the Arizona is only 44, so it's doesn't pack quite the punch, nor does it have the staying power of the Yamato. But that doesn't always mean anything in this game. Every now and again you just get that lucky hit and it ends up at the bottom. So I'm just going to set up here and show you a little bit about each ship. I'm just going to put on my tripod so that I can use both hands. Just a second. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about surface ships, and we'll start with the biggest one I have, which is the Yamato, of course. And I mean, the sculpts are just gorgeous. You see all of the anti-aircraft, the bridge, the superstructure, of course, the main guns, which are devastating. Even a couple of planes they can launch. They don't come into it, unfortunately, in this game, but it's really accurate. Of course, they couldn't collect the fighters once they launched them, but hey, get out there, do some recon, and then land back at the base somewhere. Very handy for a big battle wagon, of course. And so typically you'll play 150-point games. Some people like to play 100-point games, but if you do, the Yamato is not used. It just wouldn't be fair. There's really nothing out there that's going to hurt it very easily before it sinks it. So, I mean, you could come at it with a couple of battleships, and it'll probably sink both of them before he gets sunk. That's just the way it is. And I mean, planes might get a lucky hit in there every now and again, but highly unlikely. And subs, well, he can't engage subs on his own, so that would be a bit of a hole that he would have to plug with some destroyers. But it's just you don't have to destroy the entire enemy either. What you can do is take out half the fleet. Once you've taken out half of his points, you win. Okay, and you also fight over objectives, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, so here's the card, and I'll just zoom in here. In the top, you see the name, 70 points. You see what year it's available, 42. It's a battleship, of course. The speed is 2. Now, almost every surface ship is 2. And almost every sub is 1. All right, but there are some exceptions, of course. Patrol boats are 3. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Okay, so we have the M attack, which is a main gun attack. Then you have secondary and tertiary, and then you have the anti-air, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The other important thing is the armor and the vital armor and the hull points. So the armor is 10, which means when you roll your attack dice, you have to get 10 hits to do 1 hull point of damage. Okay? Now, if you're really lucky and you roll enough dice, I mean 16, you need to roll at least 16 dice, which is pretty rare. But you could roll 16 dice, and if you got a bunch of hits, you could sink it. Now, sixes, if you roll a 6, these are all D6s, by the way. So if you do roll a 6, it is worth 2 hits, which is nice. Now, the hull points are 6, so once you have gotten 6 hits on the Yamato, it sinks. But if you get 16 hits on a single roll, then you'll sink it outright. Okay? Haven't seen it happen yet, but it is possible. Okay? Extended range 4. Typically, you can only shoot 3 squares, which is 12 inches. This is, you can, while you're undamaged, you can make a range 4 main gunnery attacks using the range 3 value. So you see the range says 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 would be in the game in the same square. 1 would be 1 square away, 2 squares away, 3 squares away, of course. So in our game, if you're within 4 inches, it's close range, which is 0. And then all the way up to 4, so it's 4, and then up to 8 would be 1, up to 12 would be 2, and up to 16 would be range 3. So then he could go actually up to 20 inches, range 4. Okay. Torpedo defense. Each torpedo hit rolled against this unit deals 1 less point of hull damage. Okay, so most big battleships have this because you don't want a couple of lucky shots sinking a big battleship. So subs fire torpedoes, some ships fire torpedoes, and they only hit on a 6. Okay, everything else typically hits on a 4, 5, or 6, but torpedoes are special attacks. They only hit on a 6, but they do 2 damage for each hit. So less of a chance to hit, but when you do, you're making a difference. Okay, so that's the Yamato. Now you can see the main gunnery and then the secondary and tertiary. The numbers go down. Well, that's, of course, you go from your big honking guns down to your little ones. And you can use all of them in the same round. So you could, if you're within range, let's say within range 2 of an enemy, you'd roll 16 dice, then you'd roll 7 dice, then you'd roll 3 dice. And again, you want to make sure you can do some damage, because with the 3 dice, the most hits you can get, even if you roll 3 sixes, would be 6 hits. Well, if his armor is 9, it's not going to do any good. So try to pick a better target, or you just don't shoot that round, which happens quite a bit. Okay. The nice thing about these cards is that on the back of the cards, they tell you a little history about each of the ships, And you know, you find out that the Yamato is 70,000 tons. Yeah, that's a lot of steel that Japan probably could have used in other places. But there you go, 70,000 tons right there. Okay. And it typically tells you when these ships got sunk or damaged and repaired or what have you. But they give you a little history about them, which is really nice. So there you go. That's the Yamato. And again, most surface ships do the same thing. So we'll grab the Uganda, Her Majesty's Canadian ship. Okay. I was His Majesty, I guess, at the time. And there you go. It's got a main gun, a secondary gun, and anti-air, and it fires torpedoes. And torpedoes, like I say, are pretty deadly. You do have to roll a 1, though. This guy has early warning. So each friendly unit in this unit's sector or sectors adjacent to this unit roll 1 extra attack die when making anti-air attacks during the first turn of the game. All right, so the Uganda was obviously very good at that. You also see a little flag there. The Yamato had a flag. Okay. So what that is that's initiative. When you start each round, you roll a couple of dice, and then you add your largest initiative, not all of them. So if you have multiple ships with initiative, you just roll the largest, or roll the dice and add the largest. So if the Yamato rolled a 6, it would add the 2 to get an 8. And in this situation, looks like 1 is the highest flagship we have on the Allied side, so they would just add 1 to their roll. And then whoever has initiative gets to decide who goes first. And sometimes you want to go first, and sometimes you don't. And all combat is simultaneous, depending on the phase you're in. Okay, it's all phase dependent. All right, and again, I'll show you how that works in a little bit. So that's what surface vessels do. Now there's some that have some special little things, like the patrol torpedo boat, shallow draft, so he can go in where islands are, so he can get, we're going to say, within an inch or whatever. We'll have to figure that out, how close we want to get. And it's high speed. Okay, so whenever this thing's going to die, you roll a dice, and if you get a 5 or a 6, it doesn't die. And I've had one patrol boat, stick around for quite a while. It just kept rolling 5s and 6s, and so they eventually quit shooting at it, because it really doesn't do a ton of damage unless they're subs. The torpedoes are nice, though. 3 torpedoes, if you get in within 4 inches, you can really do some damage. Okay. The depth charges you see there, that's obviously anti-sub warfare. So those are handy patrol torpedo boats. And they only cost 6 points. Let's talk about the carriers for a second. I'll show you the big Japanese carrier, the Shokaku. Okay, and again, these are just really, really beautiful, beautiful ships. I really like how they're done. Here's the Soryu over here. Okay, and they're all painted up, just really nicely done. So the Shokaku, put her down there. Carriers are nice too. I'll tell you why that is. Again, we've got a flagship of 1, but you wouldn't add it if you had the Yamato. Speed of 2, it's a carrier. 1941 it was available. It's only 20 points, so it doesn't cost nearly as much. It's got some guns on it, but they're pretty pathetic. Probably a little like 5 inches or 8 inches or something. I don't even know what they had on there. But they also have some stuff that helps out any planes. Okay, so planes have their typical things, and this one here allows fighters to roll extra dice, and the dive bombers to roll extra dice. So the Shokaku really lets you, bring the hurt, and those extra dice can be the difference between a single hit and maybe crippling a ship or sinking a ship. Yeah, so that's the Shokaku. You can see there's 3 plane silhouettes there. That means it can carry 3 planes. Okay, 3 planes during the game. Now the thing about carriers, and the reason why you want to use them, is because you have planes that you then sit on the carrier. All right, and you're thinking, well, duh, that's where they sit. Yes, of course, but you do also have some planes, like the Kamikaze down there. He is a land-based fighter, so he can't actually be on a carrier. Okay, he can't be there. He starts off. You don't have an actual Air base, he's just off the map to start. And in the on the maps, there are the little silhouettes of runways, little air base off in the corners where you put your guys. Now, the difference between using an air base and using a carrier, there's pluses and minuses. The pluses is that every round you can use your fighters off carriers. Okay, there's no lag time at all. But if you use fighters or bombers off your airfields, then they can only come out every other round. Okay, and there are only 7 rounds. So if they're on the carriers, you can use them 7 times, provided they don't die and the carrier doesn't get sunk. But if they're on the land-based aircraft airfields, then you can only use them on the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th turns. So almost a little better than half. So you can load up with a bunch of surface ships and some planes and not worry about bringing out carriers, but you can't use your planes as much. Now, the thing about the carriers too is that they are kind of juicy targets, and they're not really heavily defended. And if you bring out a carrier, okay, so for instance the Shikaku, it's 20 points. All right, so it's a pretty expensive boat. Then you have basically it's got a big bullseye on it, of course, and now you got to take the fighters that you've brought out with you to actually just defend the Shikaku. So your fighters, their job is already kind of set in stone until the other guy's out of planes, and then your fighters are kind of useless. So I do like bringing them because they are good air defense. The fighters are really good air defense, and you can launch them every round from a carrier. But we'll talk about air defense in a little bit. But that's the carriers, and that's how they do their thing. Submarines. So submarines, pretty simple. That's just the I-19 from the Japanese. Most subs can't take sub shots at other subs, but the I-19 can, and so can a couple of others. I believe the Truculent from the British can do it as well. So if you look at this, it's 13 points, speed of 1. The attacks are, if you're in the same 4-inch zone, you can take 3 dice shots at other subs, okay? Or even if it's 3 away. That's a very big range for torpedoes. Most torpedoes only go to range 1, sometimes 2. This guy can shoot all the way to 3, and that is huge, okay? And finish him off is kind of cold and heartless, but if you roll 1 extra attack die when attacking damaged ships, so if you're shooting at range of 3, you had a 100% increase in the number of dice you're going to use. So that's a pretty big deal. But if you look at the armor, it's only 3, and the vital armor is only 7, and the hull points are only 2. So even if you rolled on your depth charges, or perhaps from another sub, or perhaps from a plane, because some planes drop depth charges or torpedoes, you only need to hit it twice, and you'll sink it because of the hull points only being 2. So, you can take it or leave it. But I like subs. Subs are slippery. Now, the speed is only 1. So they don't take off, anywhere real fast, but they do start the game in the middle of the board, pretty much, if you want. Okay? All right. Pardon my sniffles, too, guys. I'm sorry, I got a cold. All right. Well, yeah, let's talk about our friendly little kamikaze. Okay? So he's cheap. He's 3 points, and he's got 9 dice at a bomb attack, and when this thing takes off, it doesn't come home. That's all there is to it. He doesn't chicken out and return. He doesn't miss and return. All right, he just goes. Okay, that's why it's only 3 points, because you're going to use him once. Okay. Uncertain arrival. You can only get him at the start of each round. So you got 7 turns, and you have to roll a 4 or higher to be able to use it. Okay. If you roll a 1, 2, or 3 for 7 rounds in a row, well, the kamikaze lives to do nothing the next day, I guess, but he doesn't do anything. Land base, you can't put him on a carrier, of course. And the overstack land bases, typically you can have 5 planes, but you can also tack on 3 of these guys. And the suicide attack is self-explanatory. You ain't coming home, whether you're successful or not. Okay. Then we have a couple of bombers here. There's a Betty. There's an Emily. Okay. Really, really gorgeous. Again, I don't know if I'm getting a good angle on these things here. Hard to tell. So the Betty, patrol bomber. Okay, it's worth 6 points. Has two dice depth charge. Ooh, say that 5 times real fast. And 2 torpedoes. Okay. Excellent endurance. Okay. Meaning that the Betty, and it's a bomber, so bombers start on your air bases. They don't start on carriers. She gets to just on once per game take off a rearming counter. The rearming counter is what I was talking about, how it takes, you can only come out every second turn. So when you come back from a mission, you put one of these, I'll talk about these later, you put one of those rearming counters beside the plane. Okay. Da-da-da. So that means that's a reminder to you that you used it last turn and you can't use it this turn. Here it's saying once per game you can take that away and just yoink and get her out there fighting again. Okay, and the thing about these guys, you see the armor is 4, vital armor 7. When people are shooting anti-aircraft against you, so let's look at the Yamato's anti-aircraft. Okay, it's 7. You see that anti-aircraft symbol and the 7. So you roll 7 dice. Should you match the armor, so if they got at least 4 hits, 5 hits, or 6 hits, then it's aborted. Okay, it's sent back to base. Get the aborted marker on there, and it goes back home, and it doesn't take part in this turn's bombing. But if you roll a 7, the vital armor, you just blow it out of the sky and it's done. Okay. The defensive armament is nice. This one here says loiter. Rearming counters aren't placed on it. Okay, so the Emily is really nice. That's this one here. That's the big one. She's worth 10 though, right? So it's almost twice as much as the Betty. All right. But there you go. That's how they work. And again, I'm not going to read through all the special things that these things can do. You obviously can look them up if you're interested, or you can pause the video as I show them. And here we have the George. The George was a very good fighter for the Japanese. Fortunately, it wasn't available until 1944, but it was a very good fighter. Did very well. And look at it, its anti-aircraft is a 9. Okay, so if it's in a place, if it's in the same zone as an enemy bomber, fighter, dive bomber, torpedo bomber, it's going to roll 9 dice against that thing before that thing gets to shoot. Okay, so fighters always intercept before you get to attack the ships. Okay, so air attack phase goes before the ship attack phase. Okay, so they're very, very handy. Some nice bonuses there. Very hard to shoot this guy down too. Vital armor of 9. Not too many things can get 9 hits in one roll. It is a land fighter though, so it has to be on the land. So you basically grab 2 of those if you're going to play. If you want them, you grab 2 of them and put them on your base and take them out one at a time. And now the Kate. Kate's a nice little torpedo bomber. Right, so dive bomber, or a torpedo bomber, pardon me, with depth charges. So you'd roll 2 dice, and a 4, 5, or 6, you get hits on subs. And with a torpedo, you just roll any 6s, right? But you use 3 dice is pretty nice. But it has the alternate payload, so you can, once per game, you could just do a 6 dice bomb attack. There you go. And these, I believe, were the ships that they kept swapping out at Midway. Going from torpedo double dive to torpedo double dive, and ended up just not doing anything. Okay, so that's basically what all the ships can do. Not an awful lot of different things between the nations. There are some little specific things that people can do. like the Soryu here, you know, is a very interesting thing. The surprise raid. So if you roll a 10 or higher on your initiative roll, choose 2 enemy ships. Those ships roll 1 less attack die when making anti-air attacks this turn. Okay, so Soryu gets the planes off there in a hurry, and they attack before you know. I don't know if many of you are going to recognize these guys. Zzz, okay, Ferry Swordfish, right? Mark II. These are the British ships that did all the damage to some of the big German ships, the Bismarck. And so, again, they're not very tough. Armor 3, Vital Armor 6. They get shot down pretty easily, and they are 10 points. They do have a lucky hit, though. Okay, when this unit hits an enemy battleship with a torpedo attack, roll a die. On a 5 or higher, the battleship can't move. Okay, so that's kind of mimicking what happens when those torpedoes sneak through. Can be damaging. So if you really want to have your fighters out there and doing things all the time and whatnot, you gotta bring a couple of carriers. You know, bring out the Yorktown, boom. That can carry 3, and then you got the little, you know, the small carriers. That's the Saint Lo, can carry just 1. Okay, but it's only 10 points. All right, so it's not a great ship at all. But if you want to have at least one fighter, you can use each and every round. There you go. And we play that you can swap out fighters. So let's say you had, you know, a carrier that had, you know, a couple of fighter squadrons on it, and the carrier sinks. If there's room on another carrier that you have brought, we say that go ahead and you can swap it out. Okay, that's, I think I did pretty much everything there. I'm going to walk through some of the counters here very quickly. Pick this up here. We're going to go over here. And I think that's got everything in the view range. All right, so these 3 things up here, these are all the same. These are objectives. We just place them on the map. If you get the objectives, we decide how much they're going to be worth at the beginning of the game. So if we're playing a 150-point game, we might make each of these 20 points. All right, so you might be able to get a couple of those, get half your fleet sunk, but you still might win because you were bold enough to go get the objective. And again, these are optional. They tell you to play with them in the rules, but I mean, everything's optional. I mean, you could also play, you know, you're gonna go until the other team has no surface ships left, or you're gonna go until the other team has no aircraft left, or what have you. There's lots of different rules you can do, but we like just the half points and any objectives. And we just say that submarines and the PT boats can't get objectives. It has to be a surface vessel of some magnitude. The damage that you get, so here's the Shokaku, and if the Shokaku took a hit, you would just take that and throw it on there. Okay, and if it takes another hit, we can take that off, put that on, takes another hit, take that off, put that on. If it takes another hit, well, then it would be destroyed. And when you're 1 away from destruction, so if he had 3 hits, we'd put crippled on there, and now it can't launch or receive fighters. Okay, it can still defend itself, the anti-air still works, but it can't launch or receive aircraft. The aircraft, we always say, can head back to the original base. Okay, there are some vessels that can fire smoke, and the smoke will block. In our games, it's going to be 2 inches out from each ship, and on all sides that you can't see into or through, and it'll block line of sight to anything beyond it. And so there are some ships that do that, some destroyers and whatnot. Here's the rearming marker again that you would put on your planes that are on your air bases. We don't use the aborted markers really. We just, I mean, I don't even know if you can see it there. Ooh, I don't even know if you can read that. We just, when the thing gets aborted, we just take it off. If it's not doing an air attack, we just take it off. And then, of course, destroyed and crippled, which we've shown you already. Okay, I'm going to set this sucker up, and we're going to show you how this game goes. All right, back in a bit. Oh, one little thing I wanted to mention. These are all online and whatnot, and I'm sure you can find them someplace. These are some old rules from Gen Con, back when this game was still being made. Just got some nice rules for running a tournament. Here they just do the 100 points, and the objectives are each worth 50 points. Okay, and the idea is to get to 150 points. So I'm not really big on that because you can just charge forward with a couple of battleships and grab those things before they get sunk, because you tend to move two each turn, and you just rush out there and grab it. But I'm sure there's people better at this game than I am, and they just think it works well. They did talk about a few of the things on there. You only get one unique ship, flagships, capital ships. Okay, so you can't have more than one capital ship. So I guess it'd be difficult to get a couple of battleships, but you could definitely get a battleship and a couple of cruisers. But the other thing I want to show you here is the sequence of play. And this is just a handy dandy sheet. Now this is off the first set of rules. They have new sets of rules out there now, but you know what? These ones seem to work for us pretty well, so we like them. And everything's in a different phase. So I'm going to go through them when I play, but I just wanted to show you that all these phases, at the end of each phase, you get rid of anything that died. Alright, so it's all phase specific, not turn specific. So like in Axis and Allies, when you're just rolling your men and your tanks and your planes and all the rest, you go until all of your stuff is fired and the other person gets casualties, and then they shoot everything. And then you take off your casualties. Not so in this. It's quite specific. So we'll go through that in a minute. Also just wanted to show you, this is just most of my collection here. And I've got them all lined up. I've got Italy, Germany, Japan, and Colton, which is a buddy of mine who I just hang on to him here because it's easier than him crating it back and forth. And I got your Anzac stuff, UK, a couple US, Soviets. Even got a little Canadian fleet going there, a little bag of misfits, because sometimes you'll purchase these online from people and they'll send you the ships but not the cards, or they'll send you the cards but not the ships, which is a little annoying. But hey, you can always print proxy cards, and you can also use look-alike ships, because there's a lot of ships that do look very much alike, and so you can utilize the cards as well. So I got about 260 or so minis here, and the value of it, it's hard to say, because some of these big battleships are going for $80, $90, $100 now, and then some of the little things are going for $1.20. So it's really hard to say. But if you do have some of these and you're not playing them at all, like I said before, fire me a note, because I'd like to bulk this up a little bit. Okay.